Combat clashes continue. Military update on Kharkiv and Sumy region. Zelensky peace formula re-explained. Crimean Tatars are marking a grim anniversary. Genocide Remembrance Day. Good afternoon, this is More and today's weekly wrap-up on UATV English. As usual, doing what we do best, breaking the hardest of truth into the easiest of terms for the whole free world directly from Ukraine. Russian forces have reached the first line of Ukraine's defense in the area. President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky said in a meeting with reporters, adding that insufficient air defense had allowed the enemy to cross into the region under the cover of aerial bombs and artillery. Well, remember senators sitting in the United States and a military aid for Ukraine for a month? Well, here is the result. Zelensky also said that the Russian military's immediate goal was to seize the key location, a town of Vovchansk, just 3 miles from the border, where forces have been locked in a fierce street battles with Russians. Thousands of residents have been forced to evacuate from the border area. Of course, however, our military had stopped the Russian advance in Vovchansk. Former Minister Sergei Shoigu said of Russian Federation, of course, that he hopes that things will continue to develop as they are now. Shoigu said, I quote from now, "For this purpose, certain reserves have been created in terms of people, equipment and ammunition," said Comrade Shoigu. Well, does anyone know where are Comrade Shoigu children these days? Are they amongst these people reserves he wishes to continue to die for his master's will? No? Well, maybe Putin's daughters are sewing up open wounds of Russian invading forces soldiers on the battlefield somewhere near Vovchansk? No. Then Peskov's daughter must be on the front line, for sure throwing a Russian prêt-à-porter défilé for those about to die on Ukrainian land for a Russian cause? No. No one? Not even any one of the Kremlin or oligarchic Russian elite there on the front line? No? Well, then I guess Winston Churchill was right by saying, if the children of politicians and officials are not fighting the war, then it is no war, but business. And on contrary to whatever Comrade Shoigu hopes, our business is not doing too good these days.
The Russians don't have the numbers necessary to do a strategic breakthrough. We don't believe. More to the point, they don't have the skill and the capability to do it, to operate at the scale necessary to exploit any breakthrough to strategic advantage. They do have the ability to make local advances, and they have done some of that. They've also made some local losses. So, I'm in very close contact with our Ukrainian colleagues, and I'm confident that they will hold the line.
Ukrainian Commander-in-Chief Alexander Syrsky inspected units that are preparing to defend the neighboring Sumy region that could be the next focus for Moscow's troops. Meanwhile, Russia is shelling Kharkiv region at will, using aircraft mines and volley fire systems. Here is a footage taken by the Russians on one of the roads near Belgorod. Yes, it is the Grad multi-launch rocket system that fires its massive salvo at Ukrainian territory, surrounded by Russian civilian cars. Well, my question is, when a Ukrainian missiles hit this location in response to this fire, what and how will the Russian mass media say about that? Bloodthirsty Ukrainians murdered peaceful Russian civilians. Well, take a better look at what is going on there. The case is exactly the opposite. It's not only that Russian civilians are taken as hostages by Putin's army, and whatever happens after that, it's Kremlin's fault and responsibility, but moreover, only think about it. Russia calls these lands its own land, and yet Russian missiles are falling on Russian cities from Russian MLRS and fighter jets. And bombs, yes, aerial bombs total over the past 3 months. The Russians have dropped at least 38 aerial bombs on temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine that they call their own, as Astra confirms. So if Russians have dropped 38 bombs onto themselves, imagine how many were launched upon Ukrainian positions and cities. Imagine that and you will have a clear understanding of how much these Patriot air defense systems are needed in Ukraine. Without anti-aircraft defense systems, the border in the Kharkiv and Sumy region will become what it has become in Donetsk region, a grey burnt ground, a buffer zone of a sort. Exactly what Putin wants. And he's not even ashamed to publicly confirm that. Well, in 2022, Putin wanted to turn whole Ukraine a buffer zone of Russia. Now he wants a buffer zone around Kharkiv. Only, I guess, soon the dictator will consider buffer zone around the Kremlin, I suppose. What a relief to the world, huh? Hungarian Foreign Minister Péter Szijjártó said that the Council sought to pass a resolution that only wanted to recognize Zelensky's peace plan as a peace formula that should be considered and supported. He emphasized that this is, I quote, unacceptable for Hungary.
The Council of Europe wanted to adopt a resolution in which only wanted to recognize President Zelensky's peace plan as a peace formula to be considered and supported. This is unacceptable for us. Others have prepared peace plans, which are no worse than the Ukrainian president's. I asked that we include the other peace plans in the resolution of the Council of Europe. This was rejected by the majority. That's why I vetoed it. So there was no Council resolution. Péter Szijjártó, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Hungary, on Facebook.
Well, among the important documents of the Council of Europe for May 17th is the response of the Council of Europe to the full-scale aggression of Russia against Ukraine. This document condemns all violations of international law resulting from Russian aggression against Ukraine, including war crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide against Ukrainian civilians and prisoners of war, and all and any forms of conflict-related sexual violence and gender-based crimes. But returning to peace Zelensky formula, it is nothing new. It was first presented at the G20 summit in November 2022. Ever since presented, it never belonged solely to Ukraine. That's the case. Or Zelensky or anyone else in the world. It belongs to the world. It consists of 10 points. Please let me briefly remind them. Radiation and nuclear safety. Food safety, energy safety, release of all prisoners and deputies, implementation of the UN Charter and restoration of the territorial integrity of Ukraine and the world order. Withdrawal of Russian troops and cessation of hostilities, restoring justice, anti-ecocide, avoiding escalation and confirmation of the end of the war. All of it of common sense, isn't it? Ukraine offers each country to choose the point that is best suitable for it and to work in this direction. However, indeed, this peace formula is not an equivalent for any peace. It is an equivalent solely for a just version of peace, just and long-lasting, because aren't we all looking for that kind of peace? A peace that will not depend on one delusional, whimsical dictator ready to throw the world over the brink of nuclear disaster just so as to acquire the laurels of the great Russian conqueror. Having no chance to conquer what is really worth conquering, be it the high-tech international markets, communication markets, logistics and transportation, or any other, the Russian political elite these days is doing exactly what the Russian political elite has always been doing ever since medieval Tsars through Soviet era right to today's Kremlin usurping power of Vladimir Putin. Russians are selling wars and waging wars. Well, read my lips. Russia does not want peace. Russia wants the war. Not only Putin, Russia, I mean, and generally just does not care about anything I just mentioned. All these laws and orders, who cares in Russia? Russia never cared about the Geneva Convention, for instance. About any convention, actually. We in the West just have to all simply get over it. Whatever we do, whenever and whatever agreement, rule, charter or law we may sign with Russia, Russia will eventually break it. It will sign anything, then break it, then it will blame you, the world, for that. Internationally, of course. So how about for the international community to create such tools that will stop persuading Russia and will make it abide and respect international law? And there are such tools, by the way. Personal sanctions, yes. And alienation of property works perfectly well for starters. In easy terms, if all Russians do is breaking the laws of civilization, then how for the civilization to finally create such a law that will start breaking Russians finally? On May 18, 1944, Stalin ordered the deportation of Crimean Tatars from Crimea to Central Asia, with approximately 200,000 forced into freight train cars and sent away from their homes forever. The deportation resulted in countless casualties, tens of thousands of innocent lives lost in these death trains and awful concentration settlements created by Soviets. Every year on May 18th, the day of remembrance of the victims of the Crimean Tatar genocide is marking the anniversary, grim anniversary of the deportation of the Crimean Tatar people in 1944. Today, in historical continuation of repressions of sorts, Russia has initiated nothing else but a crackdown on Crimean Tatars activists as the day of remembrance approaches.
Persecution of Tatar activists has kicked off on Peninsula already. The Russia's Federal Security Service is issuing what they dub as warnings to them. This pattern is nothing new. It happened last year, the year before, and for the past decade. Activists have been cautioned against organizing any public events on the peninsula. It's crucial to recognize that the focus is truly on commemorating the 80th anniversary of the deportation. Tamila Tasheva, the permanent representative of the President of Ukraine to the Autonomous Republic of Crimea.
The hybrid deportation of Crimean Tatars is taking place by the order of dictator Putin right now as you are watching this very episode. Since the beginning of the occupation of Crimea in 2014, the Kremlin has taken a course to displace the most active parts of the population and replace it with a citizen of the Russian Federation instead. You observe nothing else but a large-scale political persecution here. Even before the invasion of Russia in February 2022, Crimean Tatars has been the majority amongst the prisoners from Crimea. Human rights activist Emir Hussein Kuku, Server Mustafayev, and others. I could be giving you more Tatars' names that tells you nothing. But instead, I will ask you to remember just one thing Crimean Tatars would want West to remember. During Soviet times, Crimean Tatars were forcibly relocated from their own land, so Soviets could call Tatar lands Russian native land. However, Crimean land belongs to Crimean Tatars in the first place, and Crimean Tatars, in turn, belong to one of the indigenous peoples of Ukraine. Please, just do the math. Now, time for more on UATV English. It gets more and more interesting with all these questions that I must admit. What if we announce a contest of sorts? Questions and some points and answers in the end of the year announce a winner, huh? A loyal viewer, Fahrenheit 1100, is asking, who has been left alive that could replace dictator Putin? No one could. Navalny could not, whatever you thought of him. Russian nation craves for what they call strong hand, you see? A ruler, a Tsar. And this is exactly who Putin is now for them, playing this political BDSM games with the flock. And the flock wants Putin to name a successor. And if he does not name a successor, a great turmoil will begin in Russia, and the Russian people will, in the end, love anyone who is going to survive all that and win this bloody race, chopping the heads of the political opponents off, demonstrating the strength of his hand. And Russians will love him exactly for that. As much as I might wish a turmoil, for Russia the problem with the turmoils is you never know how it is going to end. It's not predictable. And predictability, this is exactly what Putin and the hire of Putin and the hire of Putin are going to sell to Russians generations to come as freedom. Because freedom in Russian version is bad and predictability is good. Even if things have gone completely south and all is bad, it still is good. Because it's predictably bad. And all Putin's hires will be inevitably following the rules of these Russian Hunger Games. They will continue and even strengthen Putin's waves of genocide, war and oppressions. So no one left alive to replace Putin, and even if there will be someone, no change in Russia would he cause. But damn predictability, remember? It's either that or either turmoil of blood and fire when nuclear warheads, just by the way, ending up in the hands of completely rogue characters, way worse than Putin, that is possible. But let me suggest a way out of that dire predictable picture I just drew for you, dear Fahrenheit 1100. Help Ukraine defeat Putin and de-imperialize Russia. Russians just love to everything, denazify, demilitarize Ukraine. That's what they wanted, and so on. So let us together, as a civilized world, de-imperialize Russia. Let us deal with this outdated monstrosity, an abomination of Soviet imperialism, a new wave of Russian fascism. Let us all win over it once and for all, and then we sit at the table of negotiations to decide how to finally hold fair elections on the territory of New Russia, where the Russian people's president will be finally elected, maybe for the first time in the Russian history after all. Well, this is it for tonight. However, more to come already tomorrow. For news on Ukraine, please stay with Ukraine. Choose UATV English for hard truth to be put in easy terms. Like, share, subscribe and comment. Your opinion matters most to us as it helps Ukrainian voice to be heard worldwide. Stay safe, tune and stand for Ukraine. See you soon.